Hey everyone, welcome to another free Zoom community session. I'm William Rader from Artisan Tarot, and today we are going to be talking about the new Telepatha decks by Harry Price that we've just released. Now, I use these cards as a way to strengthen my intuition through the use of a pendulum. That's primarily how I use these cards and our ESP cards as well. So I actually have both of those decks here, which I'm going to show you. And I think a lot of people say, well, when you go to different engagements, how do you bring all this stuff around? Actually, I keep a lot of our stuff in this pouch. So I've got my pendulum here, which actually matches. This goes in the bag, and then I just keep our other decks as well in here. So for example, here's the Telepatha cards. We have two decks here. We have a colored version and we have a plain version. So when you buy these, you get both decks. These are both sets. Both decks come in one set. So this is the set that you receive. And so there's a plain deck and there's a colored deck. Now let me show you really quickly the plain deck, what you're going to get. These cards contain 5 symbols. Very much like an ESP deck contains 5 symbols, this deck also contains 5 symbols. And here we have a dot, an equal sign, a triangle, and like an X we'll call it, and a crescent is what Harry Price calls it. I just call it a moon. It's a lot easier for people to know immediately what that is. So we've got a moon here. So these are the 5 symbols that come with the Telepatha deck. And then these symbols are repeated 5 times to make a deck of 25 cards. And this is the plain deck. As you can see, all of these colors are just black throughout every single card here. So this is deck 1 for the Telepatha decks. Now deck 2 is exactly the same, except the shapes, the symbols are colored. So here you can see, let me pull out the different colors here. We've got the red, blue, green, black, and yellow for the moon. And what this allows us to do is if you want to work with the shapes, you can work with the shapes to develop your ESP, or if you want to work with the colors, you can work on the colors. So you can ask someone to think of a symbol or to think of a color with this deck. Now, this is very similar to an ESP deck, and I'll show you the ESP decks. We have them right here. This is also a set, and you can see we've got the 5 symbols, but they're different symbols. Here we've got the circle plus wavy lines, square, and star. So you can see already where the Telepatha deck is very similar to the J.B. Ryan ESP deck. So why is that? Why are these cards so similar, and what are they used for? So these cards, the ESP cards were developed first by J.B. Ryan in 1937. And these cards were used to test extrasensory perception, ESP. And he did a lot of studies at Duke University to try to find people with this ESP ability. And so these are the cards that were original that Kristen has restored of those cards from 1937. So in 1939, a man named Harry Price, who was a psychic researcher as well, he wasn't too happy with the ESP cards. And there's a lot of reasons why he wasn't happy with them. One of the reasons was that he thought that the backs of the cards could either be unknowingly or knowingly read, as in someone could potentially look at the cards, the back of the cards, and know what the card symbol is on the other side. And the reason for that is the cards have ESP written on the back. And so if one card is reversed out of the 25 cards, you might subconsciously, not by even knowing it, see that one card is reversed. And if you saw it previously, then you could somehow just know that that card is that symbol, which would then skew the results for testing for ESP. So Harry Price who was known as a skeptic, but also as a person who really wanted to find the truth. And he's got a book called 50 Years of Psychical Research, which is a fantastic book. It's available in the public domain, and you can see it on our blog as well, where I've shared a link to that book. But in that book, he describes the ESP cards and some of the issues that he had with them. So he created his Telepatha cards to try to address some of those problems with the ESP cards. And this is what he came up with, is this design that looks like this. And you can see, for example, if we turn the deck this way or if we turn the deck this way, it looks the same. There's no way to tell if one card is going one way or going the other way. And actually, I've got a deck right here of the ESP cards so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So you can see here, if the cards are this way or this way, they look completely different, right? Because of this word right here. And so what he did is he developed his deck to address that problem. And he says in the book that the back design is meant to dazzle your eyes, so that when you see it, there's really nothing that you could get from the back of these cards. And so he thought that was really important when doing this type of research, to not allow any, I guess you could say, cheating or somehow faking the ability to test these ESP abilities. And so that's why he's created these cards, which I think is a really great piece of history with these cards that a lot of people don't know. Now, maybe if you're in the UK, because Harry's from the UK, you might be familiar with these, but I think, here in the US and other parts of the world, I really don't think that these are popular at all. And so what we did with our restoration is that we really wanted to bring these cards back so that people could know about Harry Price and know about his cards. And Harry Price, in that book that's on our blog, he's got great stories with Conan Doyle, with Houdini, with all of these famous people during the time, where they would go to seances and they would try to see if the ghosts or these abilities that people are claiming to have, if they are true abilities or if they're faking it in some way. And so, like I said, Harry Price was a skeptic, but in the book, he talks about things that he believes were real demonstrations of psychic abilities. So if you're into this type of thing, that book is phenomenal, and it's right on our blog. I'll show you really quickly on my phone. This is what the post looks like. It just looks like this, the development of the ESP decks. And we show here some pictures of Harry Price, and we give you a little bit of a bio about him. And if you just scroll down to the bottom here, you can click this link right here, and that will take you to an ebook of the book. And the chapter is called The Story of ESP, 50 Years of Psychical Research, a Critical Survey. And so I think if you're interested in haunted houses, if you're interested in seances, if you're interested in psychics and what kind of abilities that they have, this book is my top recommendation for this. And so with this in mind, I'm going to show you how I use this deck to strengthen my own intuition and to teach people how they can connect with their intuition. And so I'm going to pull up a short video. This is from, we've got a place here in town where I teach people how to test and how to strengthen their intuition and their abilities. So I'm going to start this video right now so that you all can see how I use this pack with a pendulum. So let's get into that right now. These are called Telepatha cards. Are you familiar with ESP cards, anybody? So yeah. Magicians here are familiar with ESP cards. So my company, we're called Artisan Tarot, and we restore tarot cards, ESP cards, these Telepatha cards. And you can see there's actually 5 shapes on here, which correspond to these 5 shapes right here. And the entire deck is just the same shape over and over and over and over again. 5 sets of these actually. And we've got the circle, an equal sign, a triangle, like a cross, and a moon. And what we're going to do here, actually, we're just going to use the cross for a moment. So who would like to learn how a pendulum works and try this out? Anyone? You would? Okay, would you come join me over here?
Okay.
So this cross here, we're just going to use to help visualize what the pendulum is supposed to do. And what was your name?
Alexei.
Alexei, nice to meet you. So Alexei, we've got this line going this way and this line going this way. And what you're going to do is you're going to hold the pendulum like this. And at first, you're only going to try to imagine, just imagine, you're not going to swing your arm, right? You're just going to imagine that the pendulum is swinging over the line. Okay, so you're going to hold it just like this.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah? So hold it in the middle here over. And you're just going to imagine it swinging. So you're already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not moving your hand, you're just thinking, right? So in your mind, just tell it to stop. Wonderful. In your mind, tell it to go the other direction. See, already, I don't even. It's amazing, right? Like, and you're not doing it. You're just telling it to do it, and it happens. Right? This is amazing, right? So what we can do with this is we're going to stop it in your mind again, and you're going to have it swing this way. And in your mind, I want you to connect this with a yes. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think you've got that connection, stop the pendulum and have it swing the other direction. And in your mind, this is going to be a no. Already doing it. That's great. So this is going to be a no for you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
So how do we test this connection? You can relax just for a moment because I know it's tiring. Yeah, you can relax. You can relax. So we can test this connection with these cards. So what I'd like you to do is just take a card for me. And you can show everybody. Has everybody got it? You remember it? You put it back in. So we have these 5 cards here. I don't even know which one you selected. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to do this, but you're going to do this. You're going to hold the pendulum over each card one at a time. Mm-hmm. And when it's no, the pendulum's just going to tell you no. When it's yes, the pendulum's going to tell you yes, that's the card. Yeah. And you can start at either side. And once again, just think yes, no in your mind, and we'll see if this connection has been made.
Okay.
So that one's a no.
Yeah.
So go to the next one. It's a no as well.
Yeah.
No as well.
Yeah.
Give her a round of applause. But then it feels like magic, right?
Yeah.
So we'll try this again. If you would select another one for me. Yeah, show everybody again. Mm-hmm. You've got to put it back. So we'll mix them up. Just put it in the same order here. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. This time I'm going to hold the pendulum.
Ooh.
And you're going to hold my hand.
Okay.
And we're just going to do the same thing.
Okay.
And I'm going to see if I can transmit what you're thinking into my hand into the pendulum.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hold my hand here. Actually, I'm going to go on the same side as you because a yes might look like a no. So once again, all you have to think is yes or no. Okay? That's it. Very simple. It might take a moment for, you can see how it's kind of just jiggling and so that's a no.
Yeah, that's no. No.
That's a no. That's also a no. think that's a yes.
Yeah.
Yes? It's amazing. Yes, please do a good round of applause. That's all there is to it. So now that you know how to use a pendulum, you don't have to get something fancy like this. You can just get like a key and a string. You can get like a nut, and tie that on, and you basically have a pendulum. And this is a way for you to connect with yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you for helping me out. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So hopefully by this video, you can see exactly what I'm doing with the pendulum in order to connect your subconscious mind to your, conscious mind, right? So what I'm doing is, just to explain this, is I'm taking this card, the X, and I'm using this as a way to focus the pendulum, because a lot of times I've found that it's sometimes difficult to visualize the movement of the pendulum. And so I've found just having something on the table that you can focus on helps you explain how to get that pendulum to move. So in this case, I hold the pendulum, good question. I hold the pendulum like this. I just drape this over my forefinger here. I drape it like this, and then this is how I hold it. Now you can also hold it like this if you would like to. That's okay. Really, however you feel most connected with the pendulum is how you can hold it. So I hold it like this. And then I have this X here. And when I explain this, if you're working with the ESP deck, there's a plus on it, so you can just have it directly like this. But since this is an X, you just need to turn it just a little bit so it becomes a plus sign for the person you're working with. Now we hold the pendulum right over the middle of the X. And what I think is I just visualize the pendulum swinging over this line. And you can see it's already doing it. If I just think about it swinging, it starts to swing. And in my mind, I can tell it to stop, and it'll stop. And if I want it to go the other way, I've just visualized that swinging over the line, and you can see it's immediately already going back and forth over that line. So that's how I explain how to start to get a pendulum to move, just by thinking about it swinging over the line. Now, sometimes people aren't able to make that connection for whatever reason. Some people have more difficulty. So what I will do is I will sometimes take my finger and move it like this back and forth over the line. So once again, they can have something for their eyes to follow, which will then sometimes help make that connection with the pendulum. This person on the video, they were really in tune with themselves, and they were able to just get that moving immediately. You can see they sat right down and they were off to the races, and they were able to do it very, very quickly. This doesn't always happen, and that's okay. If you have somebody that is taking longer for it to work with, don't get frustrated with them. Just continue to encourage them, and any movements that you see, just continue to encourage them, and they're going to be able to do it. Like I said, sometimes it'll take, like you see, it was immediate. Sometimes it might take 3, 4, 5 minutes for them to really make that connection. Once they understand how to make that connection and how to get that to move just by thinking about it, that's when I connect that with a yes or no answer. And for me, I think of nodding a head like this is yes, and like this is no. And so on the card, I get this movement to be yes, this movement to be no. Now, sometimes people might already say, well, no, it's the opposite for me. Or they might say, oh, a circle for me, if it goes in a circle, that's no, and this way is yes. That's perfectly fine. It's really whatever you want to connect with the pendulum and have that be yes or no, that's just fine. But for me in my practice, this way is yes, and this way is no. So I keep that in mind, and I say we're going to link the yes with this movement and the no with this movement. And so we sit there and we just take time, as you saw in the video, we take time to say, think yes in your mind. And when you think yes in your mind, the pendulum's going to be swinging in this direction. And then we get them to stop it, and we say, think no in your mind. And if you think no in your mind, it swings the other way. So you can see this is a very easy explanation and very easy way to start connecting your subconscious mind to these movements. So I then love using these cards because we can begin to test that connection that they have in their mind to see if that connection is truly there. And this is where I start strengthening my intuition and strengthening my connection with my subconscious. And what I do with this is, because there's 5 symbols, these just are very easy and very convenient for objects to be chosen to then see if you have that connection. So in this case, we have these 5 symbols. I lay them in a row, as you saw, and I just ask the person to think of one of them. Get one of these symbols in your mind. Once that symbol's in their mind, I say, hold the pendulum over each card. And you don't have to know what this symbol is. It really doesn't matter, because this is only to test that connection. So they hold the pendulum over each one. And depending if they're thinking yes or no, that pendulum is going to move in the way that they've connected it and told it to move. And you can see here on the video, this person is really reacting because that connection is happening within himself, within his mind. And it gets like a great reaction from people, because this is magic that you can really see and that they can feel. So once you've connected that yes and no with the pendulum and with these cards, you can test it a few times if you'd like. You can test this over time as well to make sure that connection is still there. And then you can begin to use a pendulum to ask yourself yes and no questions to receive answers for things that you might want to know the answer to. So for example, before I was really using pendulums a lot, I had just gotten a pendulum and I was like, I really want to see if this works. I want to test this, see if a pendulum really works. And I had recently lost a tape measure somewhere in my house. I had no clue where it was, but I lost my tape measure. And I thought, I'm going to put the pendulum to the test. I'm going to try to find it. I remember putting it somewhere, but I can't access that for whatever reason. So I sat down with the pendulum and I said, is it in the kitchen? And the pendulum said no. I said, is it in the bedroom? The pendulum said no. Is it in the bathroom? The pendulum said no. Is it in my living room? The pendulum said yes. And then I started to narrow it down from there. I said, is it on the sofa? The pendulum said no. Is it on the desk? The pendulum said no. I said, is it on the bookshelf? And the pendulum gave me a yes answer. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm getting the bookshelf as my answer. I went over to the bookshelf, I searched it, and I didn't find my tape measure. And I was like really, really sad. I thought, oh, okay, this doesn't work. I'm really disappointed in this. And then a few days later, I was doing a deep clean, and I reached to the very top of the bookcase, like above you've got your final shelf there, and then above that shelf, I was standing on a chair to even reach it. I was feeling around, and I found the tape measure. And I thought, wow, like somehow, like I knew that it was here. The pendulum told me it was here, and I was able to find it right here in the spot where the pendulum told me it was. And so I found this just as like an excellent tool to try to connect with things in your mind like that. Also, if you've got questions that you might want to have answered about, should I take this job? Should I move? Should I, really anything that you're going through, if you want to learn and really tap into yourself and your own feelings, your own emotions, your own thought processes, a pendulum is great for this. And sometimes, if you ask yourself a question, you might even notice that the pendulum might not move. And so you might need to sit there with it for anywhere from 2 minutes, maybe to 5 minutes, even longer. And that's okay, because this is allowing you to really search yourself and search and use your own intuition to come up with the correct answer that's within yourself. And so this is what I've been using a pendulum and these Telepatha cards and these ESP cards for. this exact practice, what I have shown you right here. So I would love to just open this up to any questions that we might have about Harry Price, about the Telepatha cards, about our ESP cards, even about the pendulum. If you want to talk or share about the pendulum, maybe even some of your own experiences that you've had with pendulums, I would love to hear all of those comments and questions. So why don't we open that up right now? I'm going to just see if anybody has anything that they would like to share regarding these pendulums. I'm just going to switch to gallery view for myself here. I know we kind of covered a lot of information here in a short period of time. But like I said, I really want to open this up and just chat about how you all use pendulums. So does anybody want to start us out here?
Well, I'm happy to say a few words, William.
Oh, sure, Doug.
I do much as you did there. What you do is very similar to what I do. Of course, I've always used the traditional Zener designs.
Mm-hmm.
Some things the same. I hold the pendulum the same way you do, which I think is the best way to hold it. I know a lot of people hold it this way, but I've always gotten better luck holding it the way that you showed.
And I found too that my wrist starts to hurt sometimes, if you're in this position for too long, which is why I like this method better.
Yeah, that too. I wish I always had subject as responsive as the one that you picked for.
it was great. Yeah, like I said, this doesn't always happen.
he was great. So some other comments. I don't use in my case, the plus sign. I don't use those directions as the yes and the no. For a number of reasons, but really the principal reason is that if there are other people watching, which in my case there usually are, it's not always clear in what direction the thing is moving. People don't have that good a sense of direction if they're not really close to it. So I have always used the circle response, a circular motion, as a yes, and any straight line as a no.
And so for me, I use a circle for a maybe. And so
okay.
This is something that's like, I don't show this here because it starts to, complicate it a little bit, especially when you're working for people. But yes, I go circle maybe, and then yes, this way, no, this way. And then I can add even more to the practice.
Yeah. And then, so I think the only thing that I'm going to really add to what you said, apart from the fact that I do some things slightly differently, is you will know that the most difficult part in all of this, sometimes, not in this case, but sometimes, is just to get the damn thing moving. It's just for something to happen, and I typically, if there is no motion at all, I will do what you do. I will put my finger down and describe the motion really close to the pendulum with my finger so that they get that sense. And that can help a bit. I find it doesn't help a lot, but what I find that helps more is that once there is motion, because there's almost always going to be some motion, no matter how ornery they are being, something will happen eventually. And so to me, the best way to get the pendulum going is to essentially amplify and encourage verbally any motion that I see.
Yeah.
So if I see it starting to move sideways a little, in your example, sideways left to right a little bit, I'll say, there, that's it. You see, you're doing a great job. I'll encourage them. Yeah, you're doing great. This is great. So boost their ego, make them want to do it more. But encourage what you see. Point out that it is moving. Don't comment about the fact that it isn't moving very much. Just that it is moving. See, you're getting it now. That kind of encouragement. And I find that once you start doing that, then the thing starts to move.
Yeah,
So,
if you see a little bit of movement, I've noticed, then you say, okay, that's great. You've made the connection now. Just imagine it swinging and making, swinging more and more and more and more. And then sometimes I'll put my finger down and show, like, because sometimes even though you show here, right, that it's moving like this, I think some
yeah,
people don't really realize that they can get it to move more. And
yeah,
so you say, oh, let's have it be even more pronounced. Let's have it move more and more and more, like push it with your
yeah,
mind. And
yeah,
that, like you said, the encouragement really helps
yeah,
to for them to understand that what they're doing is correct. Because if you've
right,
never done this before, it's very strange. And you can see just by the reaction from this
right,
guy, like it's this, like making that connection is a very like magical and wonderful moment. And so for
yeah,
you to say, yeah, you're doing everything right, this is exactly what's supposed to be happening, helps solidify in their mind that they're doing it correctly.
yep, yep,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. And it's similar that we do, similar things as well, because I think this is, I've been doing this, traditionally I do this one-on-one with people, but as you know, if I'm at a bar, or if I'm, sometimes after I do demonstrations, I'll go to the back of the room and I'll just be chatting with people. And then before you know it, I'm having people rotate. Somebody sits down beside me and they go, can you show me? And then I show them, I go, this is amazing. And then somebody else comes, can you show me? So by the end of the night, I've worked one-on-one with maybe 5, 6 people, showing them how to do this. And here in Georgia, pendulums aren't really a thing. And so that's why at the end of the performance, I said, get an old key, get a ring, get anything in a string, and you've got a pendulum. You don't need something fancy in order to start doing this. And then, sometimes after after I demonstrate this, even more people will come up to me and they'll say, is this really real? Is this really, is this really what's taking place? And so I've got to then, like, I usually just say, here, I'll show you how to do it, right? And so, like, it's this like really fun, interactive piece of real magic that I think really brings people in as a group. So thank you for your feedback, Doug. Do we have? Oh, go
I just
ahead.
thought of mentioning one other thing occurred to me. Luke Germain, magical performer, he does a little routine that involves a pendulum, that involves teaching someone else how to use a pendulum. And it's on one of his videos where he explains how because he does some trickery as well as part of it all. But just the whole sequence of what he does is kind of interesting, even in this context when we're really not talking about using chicanery.
Right, not at all. Yeah.
And it's worth having a look at. His video is expensive, but there is on YouTube a recording of him doing this for in I think a coffee house in New York or something like that. I'll cede the microphone to you, and I'll go see if I can find it, and if I can, I'll put it in the
Yeah,
chat.
I'm always interested in seeing how other people are using pendulums and teaching people how to
Yeah,
use pendulums. So that
yeah,
would be
yeah.
great.
Well, if you haven't seen this, you will certainly find it interesting. So I'll have a look. Anyway,
Okay,
back to you.
great. Okay, thank you, Doug. Do we have anybody else that wants to join in on the conversation here? I'm just checking the chat room. We've got Tony who said, for those into crystals, sodalite, did I pronounce that right, Tony? Is supposedly the stone of truth. So a pendulum made out of sodalite is highly desirable and hard to find. Oh, that's really interesting. And then Tony also asked, do you call on any spirits to give you answers, or just from your own spirit of divination? That's also a great question, Tony. So for myself personally, I call upon my own intuition and my own, I guess, my own thoughts and my own feelings, my own emotions, to then have the pendulum answer my question. So I'm working with myself, but if you want to do it and with spirits or with any other way to call upon that, and that's within your magical practice, then by all means use it for that way. But great question. Any other thoughts or comments? I see Zilla is here, getting ready for his to talk about prototyping. But before we
Yeah,
go,
I had a question. Well, two actually. First, the easy one. When you were laying out the cards, when you do this, do you always put them in a particular order? Because it looked like it always came up to third.
it's completely random. You
Okay.
actually saw me adjust the cards because I was just putting them in. Like you don't have to do this, but my OCD, I was like, oh, let's just get this in the same order. But I don't think that's necessary at all. And really, normally, if I was doing this one-on-one with someone, I would just say, just pick one in your mind. Just pick one and we'll do this, because it doesn't really it doesn't matter at all that anybody else knows what it is. But because of this particular space, I had about 20 people around me. And so if I just have a guy go, think of one of these, okay, let's have it, answer your yes and no. It's like it's not as entertaining, I guess, if he's the only person that knows what he's thinking of.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's great. It got other people involved, so that's
yeah,
good.
and so now everybody is aware of what that is. I can now, sit back and then I lay them out on the table. But if you wanted to put them in, the same order every time, you could definitely do that. And one way, and I don't know if this is in print anywhere, I just know that this is the way people do it. If you wanted to, you can have this be 1 because there's basically like one line. You could have this be 2 because there's 2 lines. You can have this be 3 because a triangle has 3 sides. You can have this be 4. I guess you've got almost 4 quadrants here, 4 sections. And then this is 5. And I'm not sure why this would be 5. It's the only one left. But in the ESP deck, there's a star, and the star has 5 points. And so because the star corresponds to an ESP's deck, star, the moon corresponds to it, we can say that this one is 5. So if you wanted to always lay them down in the same order, you could very easily say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you always can put them in the same order, so that every single time you're doing it, for you yourself, you always know what that order is going to be. So there's no differences between, person to person. That's completely unnecessary. If I were just, once again, working one-on-one, I would just drop the cards down and have them think of one and just
pick it, right?
Yeah.
Good. The other thing, when I work with people with pendulum, I usually always try to get them to make as big a movement as possible. I don't usually just accept, okay, it's moving. I always, as part of the fun of it, I guess, is, let's see how big you can make the circle. Let's see how big you can make it swing. And I don't know, I found that helps, because then later on, and maybe shake the hand to relax it, to having trouble, playing around that way. And then this way, when they're answering the questions, then like any small movement is like, you accept it. But somehow I found always making it big at first when they're just getting used to playing with it. So I usually always go big first, and then before going to the questions.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think especially with themselves, like you can see sometimes with the gentleman that you saw performing with the pendulum, using the pendulum, that the moment it started moving in the direction he was thinking, he reacted. And so sometimes I agree with you, if you can get a big swing out of it, it's more obvious. But sometimes when you're working with someone, and even if it just moves just the slightest bit, that person already knows what that answer is. And so I think that, yeah, it's great if you can get it to move, in a large movement. But sometimes when you do this a lot, sometimes no matter what you do when you're working with the person, it doesn't hardly move. But if they know that it's moving and they know what the answer is, then I think that's what the key takeaway is for this. But I do agree with you. The larger the movements, the better. Yeah, definitely. So thank you for that. Did you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I agree completely. Before we move on here, does anybody have anything else that they would like to talk about with the pendulum?
Let me add to
Yeah.
let me add to what John said. I agree, obviously, that the bigger the motion, the better. Um, and in fact, I said before that that's what I do. The minute I see any motion, I encourage them and try to amplify it. But I would never say what John said, which is try and make it bigger or try and make it a larger motion, because I don't want to introduce any notion at all that there is conscious volition involved in this, as in fact there shouldn't be. So I would phrase it as something along the lines of, this is great, you're doing great. You'll find as you get better in this, that the motion is even more pronounced. You'll get a bigger circle or you'll get a longer line, but I don't encourage them to do it. I just tell them that when they get better, this will happen. Of course, everybody wants to be better, so they'll try to make it happen, but you haven't implied that there is some conscious step that they could take to make it happen, because I don't want people to think that. So,
and I'll say, as that connection strengthens, you'll notice it swings more and more and more. And the more connection you have, the larger that swing becomes. And so now I'm trying to link that movement that's already taking place with the connection that they're forming. And then now they know, oh, as I'm getting a stronger connection, this is now going to be even more and more pronounced. And I've found that type of language has worked well for me. Yes, Diego.
Yeah. One thing in your video is good watching it again. What I really, when you say push harder with your mind, that's very good. And also sometimes you had a good crowd there. Depending on what kind of what you're doing, sometimes you can collectively say, okay, let's everybody push harder with your mind. We can make this happen. Make it a collective thing. And if you ever seen like Uri Geller in person, where people are, okay, we can make this happen. Just like he would do where he'd make the poppy seed open in his palm, and he says, "Let's, we can do this. Let's do it." And again, it was about them. It wasn't, "Hey, folks, watch what I can do." And so the fact that if you ever saw Uri Geller, it's literally you saw people. Okay, it's happening, folks. We're doing this, and as he says, the seeds are opening. You literally saw people running down the aisle to experience, because the whole point is, like the pendulum and the whole thing, people were experiencing it together. They were making this happen. Yes, because Uri Geller helped them, but they were making it happen. To see people running down that aisle so fervently, to see and experience it. I'm serious. I really thought, the closest thing I saw to these people's faces was 2,000 years ago. And someone said, "Hey, there's this guy walking on the water. Look at this." And it was, I'm not trying to be facetious, but but the collective power, but the idea you say move it hard with your mind. I thought was a very powerful thing. And
yeah,
the
I
other
think
thing is
pushing it with your mind, like you said, I think
yes.
push it with your mind, right? Like pushing, people have, like, they understand what to push something means. And so if I say, just imagine pushing it, then they understand, like, oh, I'm mentally, that's what I can kind of focus on, pushing something.
The other thing is watching the video again, the person with the pendulum, great reactions, if you were positioning your camera here, basically I would just focus on him. We were talking about Kreskin when he did it, of course, this was both for the benefit of the show and celebrities. Again, a lot of it was not the camera wasn't so much on Kreskin, but watching the reactions of the celebrities. Like he's been on a talk show, he's on Mike Douglas, watching the reaction of the celebrities or watching the reaction of the audience. So carefully, sometimes the camera would be over his shoulder. He couldn't care. It wouldn't matter if you saw Kreskin's face. The fact that you were watching the different reactions of the different celebrities as things happened, or with the people in the audience.
And this is why people afterwards come up to me and they go, "Can I try? Can I try?" Because they see this person, it's working for them, right? And so now they go, "Well, I want that same experience for myself." And that's why, like I said, if you do psychic parties, if you do classes, if you can start with something like this, immediately you've got people's attention, and because they want to experience what you're demonstrating. And so like I said, I use this all the time in my practice, because it's so great. And I think people forget how great sometimes you want to do your card readings, you want to do your 3-card spreads, your Celtic cross, or your, whatever that might be. But sometimes just simplifying it down to a yes and no with a pendulum is all you need. And I think sometimes people forget that we've got multiple tools at our disposal for this. So Jennifer asks if there's any books or resources for pendulums. Yes, Jennifer, my friend Richard Webster, and Doug, you might know the name of the book. I think it's called Pendulum Power. Is that Richard Webster pendulum? Oh, I'm looking it up right now, and I'll tell you. I'll tell you the name of it. Pendulum Magic for Beginners by Richard Webster. He's got one there. That's a fantastic book that I would recommend. All of Richard Webster's books are fantastic, but Richard Webster, he's a master of the pendulum. And I think it's maybe $16. It's very affordable. So that would be my top recommendation for pendulums, is Richard Webster's books. And if you just search for Richard Webster pendulum, he might have multiple ones, I'm not sure, but that Pendulums for Beginners is fantastic. Great question.
He also has a book called 50 Uses for a Pendulum, which came out about 2 years. Right.
Great, thank you, Tony.
The other thing is with the when you're performing there at the program, if you either can give the pendulum or a crystal or the card they were working on, you give that to them, they'll hold on to it forever. And I've been sometimes if people get a crystal from you, or even if their own, again, I've seen people come to different people again and say, could you magnetize this again for me? Can you? Because again, they want to share that experience.
Yeah. And so once again, you can sell pendulums in the back of the room. If you do these, I think if you work at, this is great for metaphysical stores. If they sell pendulums, you can hold a class and say, hey, I see that you sell pendulums here. Why don't I come in and I can teach everybody in your shop how to use a pendulum, and we can sell the pendulums that you have there here in your store. And so that's, I think, a great way if you're looking to do readings in a metaphysical store. This is a great in to say, hey, this is something that I can do with your products that we can now sell to the people that are coming into the store. And so this, I think, is a great way to connect with store owners, on top of doing tarot readers that I think are offered by a lot of people, right? So this is a way to kind of differentiate yourself a little bit. And so once again, I think pendulums are the way to go. They're fantastic. So with that in mind, I think it is time to turn it over to Z-Man Zilla. Did you have anything, Z-Man, that you wanted to talk about pendulums before we moved into your I Ching?
I think they can swing on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best swing joke I could come up with in the few seconds that I gave myself to prepare for that. So
Awesome.
hopefully the rest of this will go a lot better. So
So we're really excited to have Z-Man Zilla here. He has, if you don't know, an upcoming deck that's an I Ching deck. And so we're going to talk about really how we brainstormed about this. We were really trying to find, there's a lot of I Ching decks out there. And what I didn't really like about these I Ching decks is you just pull a card and you have your number, like 58. You go to the book and you can read the paragraph or the section about that specific hexagram. So what I really like about I Ching is it's a process, right? It's the process that you have in order to create the hexagram. And you might throw sticks, you might flip coins, there's lots of different ways to do this. And so what I think was really great about what Z-Man has created is, we call it the Pai of Panda, since Zilla has created it, and Pi stands for card. So this is like the card method, basically. But what's great about this is it uses cards, playing cards, and there's still a way for you to have your own intuition or your own rituals around creating these hexagrams. And so when Zilla was developing this, this is really kind of like the forefront of this method is you're still involved in making the I Ching characters, the hexagrams, as we call them. You're still involved in that process of creating them. So you're not just drawing a card, but you're creating them. And without talking too much more about these, Zilla, we will turn this over to you so that you can talk about your new upcoming deck and kind of the process behind how you created this really, I think, genius system.
Well, thank you very much for that. So a couple of things I want to go into first. We'll do the let's go ahead and get the plug stuff out of the way here. Okay, so this is called we're calling this the I Ching Pai of Panda deck because again, I'm a panda and I like pie, and it just turns out that Pai, P-A-I, is a Chinese word that stands for both cod but also brand. It's a word that can mean both. And so, and of course, when you think branding with a panda, who do you think of? Well, hopefully me, if my branding is good, right? So there's that part of it, right? So, but enough about me. Let's talk about I Ching for just a moment, and then we're going to segue into how we came up with the idea for the deck itself. So, the I Ching is one of the oldest divination systems that we still use. It's over 3 millennia old. That's very old. Okay, and the thing is, it also comes from a time and a place with some very different ideas of how things are supposed to be run. Right. So there's a challenge in all of this. Okay. So the biggest challenge a lot of people will talk about is, well, are we taking a culture we do not understand and trying to make it our thing? That is a very valid concern and one that I took on head on while I was doing all the finishing touches stuff, because here's the thing. I feel like there is an accessibility to the I Ching because of how the I Ching arrives at its answers. Okay. The I Ching speaks of things in metaphors that are universal all over the place. Okay. There's what you're trying to do is you're trying to build what are called hexagrams. So let's not mistake that for for this symbol right here. That's a hexagram, right? It's a 6-sided shape, right? We all learned that, right? But hexagram literally means a 6-sided, a symbol with 6 elements. And a hexagram actually does have 6 elements, but those elements are lines that are either broken or unbroken to represent the concepts of yin and yang. And we'll get into that later. But the point is that when we talk about a hexagram in the sense of I Ching, we're talking about something that looks a little more like this. And we'll be taking more of a look at these later. These are the original prototype cards from when I was prototyping the idea. We'll be talking about that just a little bit as well. So anyway, you're caught up to speed on that. So the way the I Ching works is that there are 8 of these what are called trigrams, or trigram, 3-lined shape, right? There are 8 of these, and each of those represent elements in nature, by and large. Like you got 4 of them that are your basic elements, your earth, air, fire, water, right? And then you've got like mountain and lake and thunder and heaven, which are kind of like earth, air, fire, and water from a different perspective. And the wonderful thing about that is if you look at the way that I Ching works, everything talks about that duality, that relationship between yin and yang. Now, in modern eras, and in a little bit, a bit, let's face it, even back then, there's this tendency to say, oh, one's masculine and one's feminine, and just call it a day. And oh, I get it, right? But the thing is that those concepts have a lot more going on to them, and that sort of genderization of yin and yang is like one small tiny bit, right? So it's very tough for me to sit here and say, oh, let's break it down to that, right? Because then you start getting into, well, if if it just means masculine and feminine energy, does it also mean that all yin energy is bad because we tend to associate yang with things like light and order? And it's like, no, what we're trying to say is that dark and chaos and all that stuff are also necessary parts, and they fulfill a certain purpose, and there's a greater understanding that's supposed to come with that. But when you try to keep simplifying it by saying, oh, it's feminine energy, or it's the dark energy, or whatever, like you paint yourself into a corner philosophically, because you know you need both of those for life to work. And it is that simple principle that can expand into so many like amazing places that is the root of I Ching. Think of it mathematically, right? Have you ever played the exponentials game? You know, the idea of like, oh, isn't it so weird that you can like count things exponentially? As long as we're talking about Chinese culture, there's actually a story from Chinese culture that plays with exponential numbers. There's a story of a man that comes in and says, you know, if you want me to go away, all you have to do is, we got this chessboard, right? And in the first square, you're going to put a single grain of rice. And then in the next square, you're going to double that. Then in the next square, you double what's in the previous square until all 64 squares, by this rule, you have filled. And I will take that rice and I will get out of your hair and you will never see me again. And the emperor foolishly agrees to the deal. And then by week 3 realizes, oh dear, by the time we get to the 64th space, there's not enough rice in the kingdom. It's the idea that when you build exponentially, you get amazing things. So how does that relate to the I Ching? Well, the I Ching takes two things, yin and yang, right? Breaks it down by its 4 essential components to create 8 trigrams, right? Which all you got to do is take, you know, 2 trigrams and put them together, and that gives you a hexagram, and you're able to get 64 results out of that. Ultimately, though, you're supposed to use those 64 results to look up a line or a changing line in the book of changes, and you end up with a divination system that basically can give you one of up to 384 answers. All right, like tarot has 78, right? Tarot has 78 cards and thinks it's such a big shot. You know, I Ching has 384 technically. So, you know, and that's just scraping the surface, right? You can have like a reading where it's like, you know, one of 384 things in this one position, you know, and you can do an entire reading that has many of those, just like you can do like a Celtic cross reading or whatever and lay it out. But, and also because of the nature of I Ching, you can have repeating symbols. It's not like in tarot where like once you draw a card, it's in that spot. That same card can't appear someplace else. In I Ching, you can have repeating symbols. So the long and the short of it is, the reason why we're so fascinated by I Ching as a divination method is, you know, it's ancient, it's relatable, and it's versatile. There's a lot you can do with it. The thing is, though, it's also a difficult thing for a lot of people to wrap their heads around because, well, there's a couple reasons for it. First, because a lot of the guides for it seem to still be sort of stuck in this idea that, oh, nothing's ever supposed to change, which is itself anathema to I Ching. I Ching, like the whole philosophy around I Ching is that things change. You know, as you read the book of changes, you're going to see a lot of things talk about how things change from one state to another. So it's almost ironic that there's been no big changes, or that like every single time we think of a new way to do I Ching, it almost stagnates it in a way. William talked earlier about how like when you buy an I Ching deck nowadays, a lot of times it's a 64 card deck and each of them has one of the hexagrams on it, and you just sort of look it up and do whatever, right? It's a backwards move for a system that's capable of in a single like instance giving you like one or up to 6 out of a pool of 384, right? To sit there and draw a single card and just try to get a little thing out of it, right? So, you know, what I want to do is try to bring that back, that versatility, that ability to expand on it, but at the same time, make the system accessible to folks that are more familiar with cartomancy and open reading traditions that are sort of popular amongst, you know, Western culture. So, you know, so that was the challenge that I was presented with. So, you know, where do you go with that, right? You can sit there and go, well, I mean, this sounds like a fun thing to do. You know, I've certainly got some ideas that go in this direction, but how do we make it happen? And that's where prototyping comes in. So I wanted to show you just a little bit about what I do when I'm prototyping, and maybe that helps you out. Who knows? So let me go ahead and switch the camera here so that you can see the top of my desk here. Now, I brought these in here. This is I'll briefly touch on these in a bit, but just to show you that prototyping is not always a pretty process. All right. Like I'm working on a thing right now called the Hex Arcana, which is it operates on a whole different philosophy. You got to understand something. There's so much about divination that ties in so well with math, because the universe is math, right? And when you realize that, like, so much of divination is really just sort of a bait and switch when it comes down to, well, math is sort of a way of making sense of the universe in a predictable way, seeing patterns, following those patterns, right? Using math as a divination process in so many different ways is just so much fun, and you get to have so much fun doing that with prototyping. Anyway, a fun fact for you is that there are 36 cards in the Game of Hope, which is the game that Lenormand is based off of, or Lenormand, if we want to get Frenchy with it, right? Pardon my French. And so here's the thing: is if you have 36 cards, I also discovered you could lay them out in a perfect hexagram pattern with 3 layers, and it creates a whole new type of sort of divination, right? It's a fun thing to play with, but how am I going to do that? Well, prototyping kind of lets me know where the merits and flaws in that particular system is. And so that's when I bought some of these blank hex cards. You can get these packs off of Amazon here. Made some blank hex cards and actually started to play with them. And that's where a lot of my developments come in. And I can say, oh, well, that was a good idea, but I shouldn't have done it that way. That was a neat idea, and I should expand on it, that sort of thing. You do that by playing with them. And that's where prototyping comes in. See, here's the system here, the I Ching system I'm talking about here, right? Like, and this is the first set of cards that I made for it. And it's a perfect example of why we prototype. And I will show you 100% in a minute, but let's just play around with it for a minute here to show you. The way that the cards are going to work when they come out, which I believe is late November, early December, is, you ask your question. And then you shuffle these guys up here. And then the idea is that you draw cards and you make the hexagrams that you need. And you have enough cards. There's 32 cards in the deck. All right. And so what you do is that's enough cards, mathematically speaking, to make 2 complete hexagrams, and always have enough cards to do that. Right. And then what you're doing is you're doing the change process, which is trying to figure out what's changing from one side to the other. Now that we've got a wonderful book guide written by some genius. I don't know his name right now, but the book kind of walks you through the process of finding the difference between before and after. But generally speaking, the way it works is you would look up the meanings of the trigrams that you've created. Now let's and there's actually little numbers on the bottom of the card that actually help you very quickly find that information. But the prototypes obviously don't have that. So what I'm going to do real quick is I've actually got I Ching Online open in another window. We'll go ahead and see what trigram we've just drawn here. It's not as easy to do when you don't have the little numbers to help you out, but I'll do the best I can. But yeah, once you have the little numbers to help you out, it goes much quicker. I happen to know that second one off the top of my head is what's called creative. Creative is actually the first hexagram of the lot. It talks about the sublime nature of creation, is that second one. The first one is, let's see, that's and then dash there we are, marrying, the marrying mating, which is a good one to bring up anyway, because we'll talk about that later. But anyway, this one here is hexagram number 54, which I believe in our guidebook we refer to as betrothal, and it speaks of a situation where you are at a disadvantage, but you need to kind of figure out, like, you're at a disadvantage, but you may need to stick with it to kind of get through it. And so the change we're seeing here is like being in a disadvantageous situation where you've got to find a way to survive, transitioning into the symbol for creative. And I love this drawing because this is kind of the story of how this deck came to be, right? Because you know, there was another production thing was going on. I won't go into too much detail, but you know, what it basically came down to was we needed you know, the number 16 came up a lot during sort of a production thing. And it was like, well, we've got this is sort of a problem. How can we turn this into an asset? I know, let's get creative, right? So, you know, what was nice about that was that number 16, which is half of 32, which is the number we arrived at when, you know, when the pieces started to gel together for how this system would work. You see, you need a minimum of 16 cards if you're going to make if you're going to have a guaranteed way to make a single hexagram out of 2 trigrams, because you need 8 cards to represent each of the trigrams twice, right? So that's why you need 16 cards to be able to guarantee that you can make 1 trigram or 1 hexagram. So 32 cards makes 2 hexagrams, and that's how we get this system to work. So we end up with a perfect situation where we can teach people this nature of change that the I Ching is trying to teach us about, you know, actually giving actionable advice. All right, to try to give people actionable advice, you know, using these trigrams. So you know, you need basically 32 cards, which is twice 16, which is a creative way to solve this problem. So this is a little reading that actually came up that tells the story of how the deck came to be. Thank you so much for that. Now, the other thing that I do want to bring up really quickly here, though, is a lot of people are going, oh, well, this looks really kind of clumsy, actually, right? This is why we prototype, you see, because while I was playing with this and developing the system and playing with the cards like this, I remember the whole time kind of going, you know what, this feels kind of clumsy. It feels kind of weird. So at some point while I was in the design phase, I kind of realized, hey, what if we turn the card sideways? And I'm like, oh yeah, that feels a lot better, right? That uses the space a lot better. And that's where we ended up with, let me see if I can show you where we ended up with that there. Boop. And is that going to let me, here we go. Here we go. It's doing the weird thing, but let me see if I can just do it like this. And if
you're trying to share your screen, I just fixed that for you.
No, it's not that. It's I'm trying to turn the document sideways so that you can see what it is I'm trying to do here. So we'll have to improvise. This is so in the end, this is what the cards end up looking like here. Okay, this is sideways. I want to see if I can try to rotate it. It's not. It doesn't seem to want to let me do that. Probably because I'm viewing it in Dropbox. That could be the reason. Anyway, but yeah. So the end result is that we ended up with a card that this would be your before, this would be your after, and then along the bottom you'll see that all of the possible hexagrams that can be formed are numbered. And we arrived at this design through a series of prototypes. Okay. That's kind of how oh, hold on. Wrong thing. Here we go. We arrived at that design through a series of prototypes. And so the way we get to those prototypes, obviously we have to have a bunch of blank cards, you know, we got to play around with them, actually use the system. So, you know, see what's fun about it. Hey, what's fun is, you know, I can very easily make hexagrams, which, by the way, during our prototyping and playing around with them, we also discovered you can do the traditional methods this way as well, which uses what's called changing lines. In the traditional method, what you would do is you'd create two hexagrams, and then you'd look from this would be the one you're basing your reading off of, and then you'd go line by line and say, well, which one changes, right? In this case, you know, starting from the bottom, there's 1, there's 2, that's 3, that's 4. Line 4 changes, so that's one of your changing lines, 5 and 6. So you'd look up this hexagram in the book of changes, and then you'd read whatever the advice is under line 4, and that would be your fortune. So we've got 32 cards. They can do the traditional method just fine. They can also do a new method that we've created specifically to appeal to cartomancers who are used to learning new techniques using things like keywords and using open reading techniques and that sort of thing. Like, you know, one of the things we're going to be getting into when we when we do the full presentation, and there's going to be a course that's going to go with this. We're going to show how open reading techniques also apply to the trigrams and the elements that you're conjuring during your reading, so that you still have the opportunity to take that, that fundamental knowledge that you've developed doing tarot and apply that to your I Ching readings. And really expand on that while still getting the same results. So what we discovered through all of this prototyping is, we've got a fantastic system here that has so much possibility. It's powered by 3,000 years of tradition. It works for old hats and newbies alike, and all that other fun stuff. And we also discovered that this is a clumsy way to lay out the cards, and we should turn them sideways. That's the power of prototyping, finding your mistakes. And you know how easy it is to prototype? Let me tell you. The beauty of this is that, like, these cards here, like, I used to get these, right? These are like just sort of these little packs of blank cards that you can get, right? But these are so awesome because, like, you're drawing them with a Sharpie. And like Sharpies come in like 3 different sizes nowadays, right? So you can do all kinds of stuff with them, right? But I draw on these with a Sharpie. They dry and cure in seconds, and they're just so versatile. They're easy to shuffle because they've got a nice coating on them. They're playing card sized, and I want to say that like, here's the box I ended up buying of them, right? Like, I ended up just buying a whole box of these. There's like 500 in there. It cost me like $10, and I can prototype anytime I want. And I don't have to worry about, goofing and making mistakes or whatever. I got plenty more to go. I use these as note paper now. It's like, that's how wonderful they are. But it just doesn't, it's not just that though. Like, for example, like the Hex Arcana project I just showed you. I'm trying some weird stuff with that. Well, I want to see if it works. Well, the answer is to, drop $8-10 and get yourself some blank hexagram cards. The other one I have is I also have a small stack of blank tarot cards that you can get. It's the same thing. You want to try something a little bit new or create extra custom cards for yourself. These ones even have the actual like back on them and everything. So these are very inexpensive to get. You can order them through Amazon. The other thing you can do for prototyping, and I have nothing to show you for this one, so you just got to take my word for it. Let's go back to my beautiful mug, and I'll just go ahead and let you know about that. The one other thing you can do is there are companies that do if you need to do small runs of things to do your prototyping, there are companies that'll help you out with that. There's one called makeplayingcards.com. They're all right. There's another outfit called Print and Play, and I swear that's their entire business model. They do terrific work. You know what? I do have something I can show you here. Let me show you this thing that I made here. When I was testing out their work, I have a group of friends. One of my other hobbies, I don't know anybody that recognizes, I got a little wrestling belt in the background. There's all these pictures of wrestlers on my wall. I'm a bit of a fan of wrestling. There's a local fed of mine that no longer exists. I actually like to test out a company's services. I actually created a little custom Arcana deck using some folks that are actually in the Federation. I ended up creating my own set of tarot cards that have some of my friends on them and people that I've worked with. And as you can see here, they do fantastic work. And that's all because of these companies that they do small run stuff for prototyping and things of that nature. You're going to probably spend a little more than you'd spend on just buying a deck because, again, they're printing one for you. They're kind of doing you a favor. So, but the end result is that you end up with the ability to create sort of custom decks and prototypes very quickly. They do the job. So, the main company I would recommend in all of that is they're called Print and Play. You can look them up online. The other one, the one that did actually these cards, is a company called makeplayingcards.com. So check them out for your prototyping needs. And don't be afraid to get a little bit creative. But if there was any point to all of this rambling today, besides, make sure you're checking out the cool I Ching deck that we work so hard on, it's that, what seems like a simple idea All right. It seems like a simple idea in your head. You have it bouncing around in your head. And it's a dangerous place for an idea to stay, because what happens is you could very easily convince yourself that this terrific idea, is the greatest thing in the world, and just kind of let it sit there and foment, and then it never does anything. But most of all, you're also not trying it out practically. All right. Prototyping, finding just cheap little ways to just make little paper prototypes of your ideas is sometimes just the one little step you need to take this little idea you have, this little question you're asking yourself. Think of it as an experiment, even, right? Like, I'm a mad scientist asking myself, can we take this 3,000-year-old system that had a really weird, like you read all the supplemental material for it, it has a really weird obsession with inferior and superior people. Like, who wants to deal with that, right? Or like the fact that like every guidebook for the I Ching is this thick, right? Like, how do we take this massive ancient system? Is there a way we can take this massive ancient system and trim it down and make it accessible to people who are used to reading tarot cards, and that has a much smaller guide, is much more accessible, that explains change in an accessible way? Can we do that? I mean, maybe, but the only way we're going to know for sure is if we make some prototypes. And that's the other thing. Make sure you keep in mind the prototypes are not always going to look like the final product. The point of the prototype is not necessarily, oh, I have to sit there and like immaculately draw it and get it right the first time. No, these are like, the final product looks nothing like this, right? Literally nothing like this. I wouldn't try to sell these. You wouldn't buy these, right? But the thing is, you have to get through this step. This is a necessary step. It's a wonderful step because it lets you actually like play with and figure out and be like, oh man, I really wish it did do this. Oh wait, we're in the prototype stage. It doesn't have to do this. I could just change it, right? So prototyping is a magical system of, if you got an idea, spend the $10, get the cardboard, prototype it. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one for you, Zilla, and that
Sure.
is really about, before the prototyping stage, we came to you and I said, hey, Zilla, we've got this, we're trying to expand our line from Tarot de Marseille and reach a wider audience, and also do things that haven't been done before. So we would like to create a card deck with you, and we would really like to be a multiple of 16. And on top of that, we would like it to be different, right? Something that hasn't been done before. And
Right.
so we came to you with some like constraints, right? It wasn't, hey, do anything that you want to do. It was, hey, we wanted to maybe, we're a company, we do restorations, right? As you know. And so even the I Ching is something that's old that we've now refreshed. And so it's right along with what our brand is doing as well. And so I guess my question is, as you're developing things, what are your thoughts on setting constraints for yourself and saying, oh, I wanted to reach these type of people, or I wanted to do this type of thing? Like, do you, when you're creating, do you set kind of constraints for yourself? Or like for the wrestling tarot deck, for example, you said, oh, I want these to be wrestlers that are friends of mine, and this is going to be the theme for my deck. And so you haven't gone outside of that. It's kind of like you're constrained now for it to be a wrestling themed deck. Like, I'm just curious what your thoughts are as far as using constraints for the creation process.
So constraints are going to be a different story depending on what it is. Like in a lot of ways, the I Ching deck was a very hybrid project, because you say, oh, there's all these constraints, and yet there was a lot of creative freedom for me as well on this, right? Like, because you came to me and all you really did was give me a number and your goals, right? And that leaves a lot wide open, believe it or not, when it comes to the creative spectrum. But you also do bring up a good point, which is that, when you're prototyping, sometimes you're sitting there and you're thinking, who's going to be the target audience? Who is this for, right? And a lot of times when I'm creating stuff, when I'm putting those sort of constraints on myself, I don't think of them as constraints, by the way. I think constraints is I'm using that word because now you got it stuck in my head because you used it. Thanks so much, William.
Sorry about that.
But I don't think of those as constraints. I think of those as the project specifications, or what I would call a brief.
Right,
Whenever
definitely.
whenever I work with somebody, they give me constraints, but what they're really saying is, I want this picture you draw to look like my D&D character and not Fred, your neighbor, right? Like there's like, that's, they're giving me directions, right? They're saying the reason we're paying you the large deer is, that's the big bucks, by the way, is that we want this picture to look this way, and so that's your goal. You've given me a goal, right? So personally, when I create something for like myself, like I've got another tarot deck that I'm designing right now. Like, I have a thesis behind it. It's a thesis that appeals very much to people like me, right? So I'm making a product because I want it to be there. One of my mentors was an artist by the name of Tony Conrad. And if you take nothing from what I've said all this time, all this rambling gobbledygook, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. One of my mentors, Tony Conrad, once did a noise performance for a crowd of 40 people, and 39 of them hated. I was the 40th, okay? But what he did was he played violin over the sound of like metal screeching, and he does not know how to play the violin, okay? And he would like ramble and just say weird stuff. But in the middle of all this, he said the line that has defined my career: if you don't like the records they make, you have to make your own. And so that's my creative thesis. It always has been, which is that, like I can very easily, you want to hand me a bunch of money to churn out something that looks like something, the Garfield guy would make, or you want to toss me some money because you've got a specific goal in mind, I got the skills to do it. That's fine. But when I'm making something for sale, it's because I believe there's something in this world that I want to be able to spend money on, and the world ain't letting me because the world ain't making it happen. So it's my job to put into the world what I want to see from it, right? If you don't like the records they make, you got to make your own. So that's my philosophy. But the thing is, when I'm making stuff that I like or that I want to see in the world, it's a very different thing from when somebody's coming to me with project specs and creating a brief and saying this is the goal. So I hope that answers your question. Is that kind of what you were asking?
And I think too, just even in the prototyping phase, we even said, oh, if we do it this way, we can still build the characters, we can still build the hexagrams, which can't be done with other decks. And there only needs to be 32 cards. So you don't need to carry around 64 cards. You only need 32. And if we have a book, the book can just go with those 32 cards. And now you can easily slip that into a purse, slip that into your pocket. And we've like now downsized it. So like as we're prototyping, you go, oh, wow, this is something I didn't realize we could do with this. Oh, and that's like, and as you build it, you go, I want this for myself, right? Like, that's the reason.
Right, exactly. And in fact, I love this because this actually kind of shows how like the prototyping informed the final design. Because I remember that originally when we first got started, we were happy with a 16 card deck, right? We were like, oh, this will make a hexagram. That's wonderful. There's so many things you can do with a hexagram. It's wonderful, right? But then we started getting around to, you know what? When I'm shuffling only 16 cards, this deck feels thin. I don't like how the deck feels. It's too thin. I want it to feel, like, there's a certain level of cards that, like, when you get less than them, just tactically speaking, it's not as much fun to use because it just feels thin and cheap. So I was like, what happens if we do 32 cards? Mathematically speaking, we have the same ability to do things. And then it occurred to both of us. I remember that moment. We were sitting there and going, wait a minute. That also means you could have enough cards to make 2 hexagrams instead of 1. And I was like, holy cow, traditional methods are back on the table. Because I remember we were afraid that, like, I mean, me in particular, I was like, I am really afraid that some traditional I Ching artist is going to buy this deck, this little 16 card deck that works great for what we're trying to do, that we're having so much fun doing, but they're going to buy this, and I'm worried that they're going to be mad that they can't do traditional I Ching with it. And I was like, wow, by doubling the size of the deck, not only do we get that fun little hand feel that we're going for, but it's now, it can now be used for traditional I Ching readings as well as modern. And it opens up another path towards that method of change that I'm trying to teach people, So yeah, again, prototyping is what made that possible. If all we were doing was just fiddling around with it on paper and just, oh, this is a good theory on paper, and the first time we touched the cards is the finished product, we'd never gotten there. We'd still be planning this little packet of paper where the guidebook is thicker than the deck, like so.
I think
So
that also just brings to another point about the prototyping stage, and that is working with other people. Like we were working
yes,
together, bouncing ideas back and forth. Well, what about this? What about this? Oh, then we go 32 card. Well, that solves these problems. And right. And so like just like prototyping it and then not being afraid to show it to people and getting feedback and seeing
yeah,
what they think about, whatever it is that you're creating. I think that's a really important step of the
absolutely.
prototyping phase.
Absolutely. Again, a thing you can't do unless you muck up and just get the cards. And again, if this is something you're looking to do for yourself, this is my recommendation right here. Look for the big fat box of 500 blank playing cards. I want to say I got this for like $12 off of Amazon, and I use it for so much. But the fact that like you have all these little card-sized pieces of paper that like like if I send art to fans with it, I write little notes with it. Like I just got a key thing here, and I use it to write down the little key matrices for my key device, all kinds of stuff. So this is if you want to get into prototyping your own ideas, this is where you start here. You just you're ordering your bath candles or your weird British food or whatever it is you order off of Amazon. Just kick an extra $10 in there and get one of these. You'll be surprised how often you use it when you get an idea. So,
And I do see that
yes,
Tom here has raised his hand. So I'm going
I
to.
do also see some questions in the comments that I want to hit really quick, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Why don't we go over to Tom just because he had his hand
Sure.
raised?
Yeah.
And then we can go to those other people in the chat as
Absolutely.
well. So Tom, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you.
I'll just spotlight you here and we can chat.
Great. Zilla, thanks for this was awesome. So two things. Number one, I was already going to pre-order, but Tony Conrad reference, you sold me. I'm in. So that's number one. Number two, I was just curious because, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. I was thinking 32 sound, in my opinion, 32 sounds like a light deck too.
Mhm.
Did you experiment with like 64, or was that just like overkill at that point
Well,
for what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, 64 did not change the process of what it was I was trying to do, right? Like, give you a little example here. Like, so this particular deck right here, the Hex Arcana, one of the goals of the Hex Arcana was I wanted to find a practical reason for there to be a six-sided card, right? That was something I was thinking of, right? So the number 36 came up as sort of creating a perfect shape, and that's basically that goal was made, right?
Mm.
So you could sit there and say, well, tactily speaking, like double that would feel better, right? But at the same time, what would you do with twice as many cards? What practical reason would there be for the system itself for that? And so, you come to a balance of priority, which is what I call it. And you know what? I wouldn't have brought it up unless you told me about it. See, we're working together. I love it. Thank you. But you got to think of balance of priority in those situations. So you can say, yeah, 64 cards feels better, but we lose two things in the process. First off, it costs us twice as much to make the deck, right? So for no added benefit, right? And to create the benefit, I would have to make the system work, in a way where it creates 4 hexagrams. Now that's just too many, right? 3 is a good reading in tarot, right? A basic reading in tarot is 3 cards, right? And we're talking about a system that at its heart can create like what was the number again? Over 300 like diverse ways if you're using a full I Ching. I have to specify that right now. The Pai method that we demonstrate in the deck as he's sold doesn't have over 300 things in it. It actually gives you keywords related to the sort of basic meaning of each of the hexagrams. It's meant to be a foot in the door technique, and it helps you. You can do the full version if you want to, but you're not going to open up the tiny little guidebook that comes with this and see over 300 ways to read these cards. Anyway, so the thing is that with 32, it was accomplishing its goal, and there was also sort of a little secondary goal. And William brought this up a lot, and I loved it, which was that most I Ching decks you see out there are 64 cards, right? And what it is it's 64 cards that give you very little information. Right. So there was also that selling point for me, that little point of pride that's like, we can do in 32 cards what they do in 64, right? Like their end point is our beginning point, and we're doing it with twice the efficiency. So
but it's not even that, Zilla, if you think about it, because their deck has 64, and if they want to use if the same hexagram comes up again, like you can't do that with the 64.
Yeah, they can't even, exactly. We're doing more with less. Right. So there's so many ways in which, I mean, I understand what you mean when you say that. What our line of thinking was, we had that point of balance, right? Which is like, okay, do we want to sacrifice all of that just to have a slightly meatier deck? And the answer was, well, let's also keep in mind that we're packaging this with a 100-page guidebook, right? So the packet that you're getting is going to be card size. It's going to be as thick, if not thicker. I didn't check the final measurements, but you're getting 32 cards and a 100-page guidebook. And so you're getting a nice little thick packet right there, and it does shuffle pretty nicely. So, but also one of the things is we're going with tarot sized cards, and a lot of the folks that personally my side of the aisle, when I'm involved in a project, the folks that are sort of there because Zilla's name is on it, right? They come to me a lot and they say, well, you recommend a lot of decks that are like too much for my little hands, right? So, like I have the big meat claws, right? I can tell you, I bet you and I were similar there, where we got the bear paws, right? Yeah. So, so a lot of times it's hard for us to remember that it's like, you can go smaller if you have to, right? But some people just can't go bigger. And so, it's helpful sometimes to be like, well, if we're going to use full-size tarot cards, if there's only 32 cards then at least they can use like the sideways technique a little more easily and not have to juggle 78 cards or whatever. So, you're right. We did kind of think about that. It was something that came up in prototyping, and that's the process we used to decide whether or not we were going to go with 64 cards. Hopefully that gave you some insight. Thank you for that.
Definitely did. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And if you have any other questions while we go through this, just raise your hand, let us know. Okay, do you want to go to chat, Zilla?
Yes. So let's see. We had somebody ask what wrestler, Diego Domingo asks, what wrestlers are for the Lovers, the Tower, and the Hangman? It sounds like you're talking about my custom deck. Now, here's the thing with this one. You're not going to know any of these wrestlers. These are local folks, but I'm happy to kind of just show you, because, I love every one of these people, but also to give you some ideas of like how I approach doing a custom deck. All right. So, for example, like this is a real person, right? This is Nick Wayne, who you may actually know because if you watch AEW. Nick Wayne is actually a good friend of mine, but you'll notice the Arcana number on Nick Wayne is 0, should be the Fool. And even the coloration sort of speaks of the Fool. I'm not about to call Nick Wayne a fool, especially not to his face. So instead, I've called him the new challenger, right? So, that's an example of one way that, you want to contextualize, and the reason why he was picked for that particular role is because of how young he is. At the time I made this deck, he was only 17, and so like of all of my friends, he was the youngest and the one with the most promise, which certainly sounds like a fool's journey to me, right? So we asked about the Tower, the Lovers, and the Hanged Man. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. That one's fun, by the way. So, but let's see. The tower is where's my tower? Where's my let's see. No, that's just so number 16. Where are you, 16? Here we go. That one's got an interesting story of its own. But okay. So first off, you may recognize this fella. Obviously, I had to make him my death card. That's Funny Bone. It literally wrestles under the name Demigod of Death. So for the lovers, yeah, the lovers was going to be a tough one. So I actually called them the tag team, and we went with the tag team champions at the time that the federation gave out. So that's a little tag team called State of Emergency. And we are definitely talking about the latter day interpretations of the lovers as, like, you know, finding your perfect pair. So that, not a lot of romance in this card, so, you know, take with that what you will. The Hangman is this guy Max Burnside. We went with one of my friends who plays kind of a stoner character, and actually I didn't even call it the Hangman. You'll notice I called it What Card Am I. And so the joke is, of course, he has no idea where he is, but he's just happy to be helping. So make his picture upside down, you got it. And then for the tower, there's a wrestler by the name of Pitfall Jones. And his whole gimmick is basically that he dresses up like Indiana Jones. So his card is Pitfall Jones in the Tower of Doom. So there's it's one of the least relevant cards in the deck. I wasn't sure who to make my tower because I didn't want to connect any of my friends with the concept of destruction, but there you have it. So but yeah, no, it was just a lot of fun to put together a little series of images and honor my friends by making them a divination device. So yeah. Oh yeah, and Warhorse is my high priest, or my hierophant. He rules ass. All right, thanks for that question. And then finally, somebody asks, where can I pre-order the deck? William, I turn that one over to you.
Yeah, great question. So right now, it's not available for pre-order, and I'm not sure if we will have it available for pre-order. We might just have these in stock, and then once they're in stock, we might then just have that available for purchase. I'm really not sure what we're going to do quite yet. It really depends on the time frame for when the decks are going to be available. We're currently working with the printer, and hopefully we'll have them within the next month and a half. That's the goal. So there's always details that need to be done before you print. So you basically send files back and forth, make sure everything is correct. You get your proofs, and then after you approve all of the proofs, they're ready to print. So we're in the looking at the proofs, finalizing everything so that we can then print. So hopefully we'll approve everything Monday or Tuesday of next week. They'll be at the printer, and then we just wait for them to finish everything. And with Zilla decks especially, we've got the book, we've got the cards, we've got the box. So all of those have to be made in order for his deck to be complete. With Alejandro's deck, that has just the cards and the box. So that I think is going to be a little bit quicker to get finished. So I think Alejandro's will be out first, and then Mann Zilla's is going to be out after that. That is what we are planning on right now. And hopefully, like I said, late November, early December is the time frame that we're looking for these two decks. So great questions, everybody. Before we wrap this up, do we have any other questions or comments that anyone would like to share before we call it a night? For me, it's almost it's getting close to 11 p.m. my time. Do we have any other comments, questions before we call this a night or a day? Okay, great. Diego, yes.
Yeah, very good program. And interesting. I just following up on last week or last session, we had a little show and tell. We showed a couple of ideas, like say you hand out the crystal or whether you're selling or selling them in the back or online. It's great. We showed a couple of things. Remember, of course, we're talking about a 50-year plus career, and you always had to have something new. We showed a couple of the things. Kreskin was always selling different versions of the crystal. So we had this, I think we showed two others from last week. He had this, and this is one of the, after the original Milton Bradley version, he came up with a slightly more high-end version. And so it's the same thing, a crystal, a board, cards, and I remember the last thing is, let's see, in Uri Geller, he had one too. It wasn't a pendulum, but it was a very similar format. You still had the card, you still had the crystal, and again, it was a very similar format. But the whole thing, again, you can very much personalize this and create a very strong experience for it. And that's why, again, just as Uri Geller followed Kreskin's lead to have a very similar product moving out.
Can you show us what's in that Celtic Oracle?
Yeah, see here. Just give me a second.
I like
When
to
you do
imagine.
that-
I like to imagine it's an actual Celtic Oracle that's been trying to get out for decades.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Pretty good
fancy.
artwork here. Okay, so we have similar. It looks a little similar to the other one we showed. So we have the kind of a nice. Excuse me, a second. In here. Oh. Okay, and of course the booklet, and we have great cards. So we have the cards, Kreskin on the back, or as so forth. And let's see here, they have okay, and then different things you can ask and things to work on. Let's see here. Yeah, they're all. Oh yeah, would you like to? Okay, yeah, all different questions about yourself or something you want to ask yourself. And let's see here, what do we have here? Okay, we have the coins. I don't know. Oh, again, I haven't taken this out in ages, so I don't know what it is. So let's see here.
And then that board, it looks like it's got the plus sign on it too for the pendulum.
Yeah, and so the chips have a yay or nay. So again, so depending on here, you can find out answer to your question. And here's an interesting crystal. Okay. What that is.
Whoa, that's
It's
super
interesting.
cool.
So like some claw holding the crystal itself. So it's interesting. Let's see. He doesn't call it. Does he call it a? Yeah, he doesn't. Remember, he doesn't call it. This is not a crystal. It's a Celtic oracle. Okay, so it's positioned a little differently here. So again, so I guess particularly with the board itself, it's a whole much different look and feel to it here than a traditional crystal here. But again, like anything in marketing, you always need something different, something new and improved. No one says, "Oh, it's old and lousy." So it's always new and improved, something different to sell. I just thought to show you this.
And what's in the other box?
Let's see here. Yeah, the Uri Geller one's still in its cellophane. I never unwrapped that.
Oh, okay, then never mind then.
Yeah, but the Kreskin's ESP, I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh,
before.
yeah.
See if I got a bad arm. Yeah, like I say, all very similar here. Again, he's got the board. He's got the package with the cards. And interesting here, he has rather than crystal, it's a you hold this, and for the to get it to divinate. So again, you have with yes, no, question mark, etc. here. And let's see here, they have because remember, it's called again. This one doesn't say crystal, it just says Kreskin's ESP. So it has it comes with symbol cards, and like I say, all very similar, but just always something different, new to market. And some also remember, each time he comes, rather than the original Milton Bradley one sold millions of sets. But again, by always coming out with something, you have two advantages. A, Milton Bradley has something new to sell. You had the old one, now here you have the You got the red crystal one. Now let's try the Celtic Oracle. And of course, the advantage is it's because they have a new product. Then Milton Bradley is going to want their PR people to pay to have Kreskin go on Carson and Narek Douglas and Dinah Shore and Art Linkletter and all the others to push the new product they have. And again, all those people are happy because Milton Bradley is paying them to have Kreskin go on to their show.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those, Diego. I appreciate it. Zilla, do you have anything else that you would like to say before we call it a night here?
Nothing I could think of right now. I've certainly got. I'm very excited about what I'll be working on over the winter. But I don't know how much of that I want to tip my hat on for reasons you just elaborated on. So,
Yeah.
well, let's just put it this way: there was a thing that was on my other screen there. I know it's confusing. I'm coming from two places now, but you know, speaking of many hats, I'm doing another thing right now. But anyway, yeah, if you want to stay in touch, go to pandangit.com/links, and that's LYNX, like the cat. Pandangit.com/links. That'll keep you informed on what I'm doing. I am honored to say that I was finally invited to Cameo, so that's one additional way on top of all the other ways that you could get greetings and messages and all that stuff. And be sure to check out the courses in shops and that sort of thing over on Artisan Tarot to get your readings and your one-on-one training sessions with me. So yeah, please do that, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Zilla, for joining us here today to talk about prototyping. And thank you also for everybody joining us here to talk about the Telepatha decks, Harry Price, and how you can use a pendulum to strengthen your intuition. I've been William Rader from Artisan Tarot. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, for participating in this free community Zoom session. If you want to learn more about these, you can just go to artisantarot.com, click on the events tab, and you can see all of the upcoming events that we have coming up, especially those community events. You can just click the link to register, fill in your information, and you'll get a link right to learn how to join us. So once again, I'm William Rader. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We will see you next month. Bye, everybody.